big ball. Going for the big shot, and he hits it.
That's batted into the air, intercepted, and the Bears are going to win it.
It's a new episode of the Halas Beat. The Bears have officially reported to Halas Hall for training camp. Rookies reported this past Saturday or Sunday, whatever the 19th was. Vets and the rest of the roster reported today on Tuesday, July 22nd. Welcome to the Halas Beat. Usayd, Koshul, Steve, Letizia here. You can check us out on Twitter at CFC Bears, at Usayd, Koshul, at Halas Beat. Steve, I don't know about you, but there was a lot of, word salad up there today from Ben Johnson and Ryan Poles. Obviously, there's tons of different goals for Caleb Williams. Jalen Johnson and a handful of players are out, but there's also some of them coming back, some guys that we had concerns about. But how's it going today? First off, you ready to get this 2025 season started?
Absolutely. Been a long off season. It always is, but it finally feels like we're the light at the end of the tunnel. We can see it. A lot of word salad today, but it's kind of what you come to expect from, these press conferences. You get all excited for it because it's, Bears are back, and then it's the same thing every year. They kind of just don't really say anything, but it's still exciting just to, hear from everyone and just that the Bears are back. So it's hard not to be excited.
I mean, and you talk about getting excited. One of the big things is, those pictures that the Bears will post on social media, and then all of a sudden there's nothing but speculation from the fan base on Instagram plus Twitter as well, saying, oh, well, so-and-so slimmed down, so-and-so's kind of wearing this. I will admit, one of the most underrated parts of training camp for me is... You remember when the Bears were in Bourbonnais and you used to see guys bringing in like TVs and their Xbox and all that? Those types of pictures, I think, were easily one of the most underrated parts of all these veterans reporting to camp. But now it's kind of just like you see Jaquan Brisker walking in with an Allen Iverson jersey, and I should say a vintage Allen Iverson jersey, because the old 76ers logo to me, I don't know if we've got Bears fans in Philly listening to this or South Jersey, but the old 76ers logo is much better than the new 76ers logo. A little bit of a side note, but on the subject of guys being back, I guess there's some good news, but also some bad news, because Jalen Johnson's out with what appears to be a leg injury sustained during training. So the Bears are kind of just monitoring that. I don't necessarily think that there's a lot to worry about there. I know that when he went on the NFI list a couple days ago, it was kind of just like, oh my God, this is not, a good thing at all. And then there was a speculation about, is this because of the contract and the recent comments made by him saying the market's moving, we're probably going to have to come to the negotiating table very soon. First, everyone thought it was that. It was just the Bears trying to save face. Now it's some clarity, but I don't know about you. I'm not putting a ton of stock into this Jalen Johnson injury.
Yeah, I don't think it has anything to do with this contract. I'll start there. I did see those on Twitter as well. I highly doubt that. I'm sure they might be starting to breach that conversation behind the scenes a little bit, but I don't think it's gotten to the point where he needs to, sit out training camp. So I don't think it's that. I will say, it's never good when a guy is on the NFI list. The only reason I'm slightly concerned, but also slightly not concerned. So slightly concerned only because they didn't say, oh, he's day to day. They just said flat out he's going to be out a couple weeks, which, you don't like to see. But I'm also not concerned because it's Jalen Johnson. He's a veteran. I know he's learning a new defense, but if there's one player who can miss a few weeks and be fine, it's probably Jalen Johnson. So let him get healthy. Let him just kind of, get into the swing of things. It allows some other guys to step up potentially and kind of prove themselves. We've talked a lot about Zay Frazier. He's going to get a lot more reps with the ones, all these guys kind of move up a slot. So I think Tyreek Stevenson needs as much reps as possible. So all these guys are going to get a lot more reps. So like I said, he's the one player who could probably miss some time and not really miss a beat once the games actually start.
And that is a really good point, because you're talking about a guy that at this point is a seasoned vet, and he's kind of seen a little bit of everything in this league. Like, I was talking to someone earlier today, and one of the things that, I had brought up was you feel bad for some of these guys that were drafted by Ryan Pace simply because they've been here through basically 2 GMs and then they're on their third head coach. So it's this sort of endless merry-go-round. I mean, it's obviously, Cole Kmet and Jalen Johnson have seen a little bit of everything in the city besides, sustained success and winning. Although the Bears did make the playoffs their rookie season, but I'm not necessarily concerned about Jalen Johnson. But I think to me, the more sort of interesting conversations here are the fact that Colston Loveland's ready to go, as is Braxton Jones. Now, Braxton to me is worth starting this conversation with here, simply because you kind of look at the trajectory that he's been on the last couple of years, and it was kind of just like as a rookie, he was going all the way up, right? When the Bears were having that sort of competition during Matt Eberflus's first year as head coach, by the third week of camp, I want to say Braxton Jones was the starter at left tackle, if you remember, and then he holds that spot down for 2 years. Now the Bears bring in new staff, so they bring in Ozzie Trapil. Kiran Amagaji's in that mix too. We'll talk about left tackle later, but I think it's good to see that Braxton's ready to go. And then the even bigger one here is the fact that Colston Loveland, who, in my opinion, has a chance to be a really underrated player, is essentially ready to go as well. So you're kind of starting camp fully healthy on offense, which is something that this team hasn't been able to say in a really long time.
Yeah, I agree. Both of those were huge. With Loveland, we'll start with him. Just being a rookie, and being able to just be healthy right at the start. I was a little worried that he was going to be on the NFI list, PUP list, whatever, for a few days, and he's going to just be behind the 8 ball. But now he can just kind of come in and just take off. I think one of the things that Ben Johnson said, or I think it was Ben Johnson said that he didn't see anyone in the building more than Colston Loveland over the last couple months. So you could tell he kind of attacked his rehab really hard. So him being back is huge just for his development. It gives him a shot to actually be an immediate contributor week one. Whereas if, he was out a week or 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it would have been tough for him to kind of make an impact week one. So I think that's huge. Braxton Jones, I was really not, I thought Loveland had a chance. I was really not expecting Braxton Jones to be kind of full go at the start here. So I think that's huge. This is a season where that is so important for the Braves franchise this is going to set the tone for the next 10, 15 years. It's such a huge season for Caleb Williams. He needs as much help as he can get. And Braxton Jones has his issues. There's no question there. But he's definitely a guy that you can work with at left tackle. And I think he does kind of have the leg up to win it just because he has the experience. And I think having a guy at left tackle that you know who he is, who he's not, you can kind of scheme around him. Whereas if Ozzie Trapil, who I like, if he was, maybe forced to start, week one, he's a rookie left tackle who's making a switch from right tackle to left tackle. He's going to have his issues. He's going to have some, bumps in the road as he grows. And I think having Braxton Jones back and allowing him to kind of start the season, assuming he wins the competition, I think is going to be huge for the Bears offense. It gives Caleb Williams a little level of comfortability there, having a vet there rather than a rookie. So I think having both those guys are huge for the offense.
It is sort of the dynamic here between these guys all of a sudden gets really interesting, because the Bears, beyond just certain players being available, they did make a couple other moves as well. I think that, the addition of cornerback Trey Flowers certainly surprised me. I will admit it took me a minute to be like, wait, who is Trey Flowers? Because I originally thought that he was the guy that was the pass rusher for the Patriots.
The Chiefs, or the Patriots, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, the Patriots and the Detroit Lions. But then I was like, no, wait, it's the cornerback Trey Flowers. So, Trey Flowers, I think, is a nice veteran addition to this cornerback room. Not that I think they needed more cornerbacks. They're just trying to see if they could push guys like Terrell Smith. And I know it sounds crazy, but they do want to push a rookie in Zay Frazier. And then obviously, the other one, which is Tana Kasim. I'm sorry I can't say his name properly, but he, I think, to me, is the more sort of intriguing free agent addition here. And it's simply because you're talking about a guy that, was with Dennis Allen in New Orleans for a couple of years, a guy that is, pretty solid. You're talking about a former second round pick, a player that's 6'7", 290-ish pounds. So he's never been, this great sack monster, but he was at the Senior Bowl back in the day, so the Bears certainly love their Senior Bowl guys. But then I think the other big thing is also this, right? Is it's like you look at him as a player, and having spent the last 3 to 4 seasons in New Orleans, there's that familiarity with Dennis Allen, which I think is a big plus. But then number two, we talked a couple weeks ago on this show about how we're not really certain who that third pass rusher is going to be, then who that fourth pass rusher is going to be, because it's like Montez Sweat, Diote Ingbo, Austin Booker ? Casanal potential, right? So now all of a sudden they've added more to a group where they were top heavy, but they were also pretty light at the bottom, toward the middle and bottom, I should say.
Yeah, and I think both those guys just bring a level of competition to training camp that maybe we wouldn't have had, before. I think that goes back to kind of what was one of my biggest takeaways, which we'll get into a little bit, but it's one of the biggest takeaways I had was just how it seemed like every job was going to be earned. Every job there was competition for. We'll talk a little bit about the left tackle position, but I think these guys coming in that adds to that. With bringing in a defensive lineman, like you said, it now lights a little fire under Austin Booker to maybe go that extra mile in training camp to kind of take the next step. Same thing with Trey Flowers, with Zay Frazier and some of the other cornerbacks in the room. So I think overall, like that's what I'm getting from this press conference is every job, is a competition and no one's being handed a job. Obviously, we know who a lot of the starters are going to be, but bringing in these vets to help the younger guys, Capassanon has the experience with Dennis Allen, like you said, which I think is going to be really big for the entire D-line room, but especially a guy like Austin Booker, who needs that kind of veteran guidance, learning his second defensive playbook in 2 years. So I think those guys it speaks to the level of competition that they're bringing in.
All right, I got to ask you this, and I totally remember this, by the way, but the Bears brought in DJ Chark for a visit to Halas Hall the other day. I know you've had your tweets about this, but maybe for our listeners that have not been as active on social media, yay or nay to adding DJ Chark to the wide receiver room? Because to me, I would say yes to it, because you're bringing, number one, a veteran that does know what Ben Johnson's trying to do on offense. Even though the offense here is not going to be a carbon copy, it's not going to be copy-pasted what it was in Detroit. But then the second big thing is this, is just like it's creating more, like you mentioned a moment ago, competition for these guys like Zacchaeus and Tyler Scott, as well as Miles Boykin. They, guys who in the past would probably just been, bubble players on the roster. Now they're really going to be forced to kind of work for a roster spot.
I would be okay with it, honestly. I know it kind of surprised me and a lot of people on Twitter, but I would be okay with it because another thing that the Bears offense could really benefit from is a true deep threat, which I think Chark is. They don't really have that much. They have some good wide receivers. Rome Odunze can win deep, but I wouldn't call him a deep threat. Same thing with DJ Moore. Like, he can win deep, but he's not really a true deep threat. You got Zacchaeus and Duvernay are more, east-west, kind of underneath guys. Tyler Scott, I think, can be a deep threat, but you're not going to rely on him. You're not just handing him that role right off the bat to bring into that competition. I think that could unlock, an element of the offense that they don't really have right now. So I'd be all for bringing DJ Chark in. He's not going to command a huge contract. Bring him in as a flyer. You get that competition and see what he has left.
I mean, it is sort of to be determined, right? But if I'm not mistaken, this is what the fourth straight year that it's been report day for the Bears, and they've signed a veteran right around the same time that all these players are reporting. I know it was Riley Reif and then Michael Schofield a couple of years ago. Then it was, Unique Ngakoue. Forgot who it was last year, but this year, does Casanal plus DJ Chark could possibly in that mix. Now, here's the deal, dude. So Ryan Pauls, I don't know how many of you guys actually caught the presser, but he was up there for 4 to 5 minutes, right? And it ultimately just became something where it was like, yeah, guys, I'm not really going to say too much, but this sort of is what it is, right? In terms of everything that he was kind of talking about. And again, Ryan Pauls really didn't say much besides your typical like, hey, I'm super thankful that our staff works so hard. I'm also super, excited to kind of get things started. So it was certain, word salad that we've quite frankly heard in the past. But then Ben Johnson's presser, I feel like, was way more interesting to me. The reason that Ben Johnson's presser got a hell of a lot more interesting is simply because he's up there. He's talking about how, I want players to be consistent, dependable, reliable. And again, guys, we're paraphrasing with some of the stuff here, but he's up there talking about how, I want guys to be consistent, reliable, dependent. I'm not going to go ahead and I'm not going to lock in any of these players. I think to me, as it pertains to the one position on offense where we know that there's going to be competition, was the offensive line. Now, someone had asked him, like, hey, do you see Darnell Wright possibly getting reps at left tackle? And Ben Johnson was straightforward with it. In the past, we've been used to answers like, well, we'll kind of see how everything plays out. And we'll talk about that in a couple minutes here. But with Darnell Wright, it was kind of, no, he's staying at the right side, which I thought was a very interesting thing to be really upfront about.
Yeah, I mean they've mentioned that Darnell Wright's staying on the right side a couple times this offseason, and the beat writers keep asking about it. But I think it's absolutely the right move. I mean, you have a guy, a young offensive lineman who's performed really well and is clearly on the upswing. So keeping him there just makes complete sense. You don't rob Peter to pay Paul. You don't make one hole to fix another. So making sure that Darnell Wright is stuck at right tackle, I think, is absolutely the right decision. I'm glad they kind of held strong on that and didn't falter. But yeah, I think the left tackle, I mean, they mentioned between Braxton, Ozzie Trapillo, Karana Bagaji, that's a three-way battle. Ben Jackson specifically mentioned it's a three-way battle between those guys. And I think, it sounds to me like they actually mean it. This is not something just like, oh, we're going to say it's a battle, but it's Braxton Jones is going to be the starter. I think it actually is a battle. I think Braxton Jones is going to come out as the left tackle, but I do think if Ozzie Trapillo or Karana Bagaji comes out and has a great preseason, great training camp, that they could actually overtake him. But I think it is his job to lose.
So going back to the Darnell Wright comment here, where Ben Johnson was pretty much like, yeah, Darnell Wright is sticking at right tackle. To me, putting the coach's hat on here, there is a sense of consistency that offensive lines need to have if they are going to find success. And if we're being fully honest here, this is an offensive line that, if you look at it over the last 3, 4, 5, 6 years, there really hasn't been a lot of consistency. And you look at the early years of the Ryan Poles era, and I get we're only in year 4, but you look at 22 and 23, we thought that there was consistency because the Bears had young ascending pieces in Braxton Jones and guys like Tevin Jenkins, and they were kind of your mid-round picks, the high upside guys like a Larry Borum that we thought could develop into something because they provided a sense of versatility, but it really hasn't been the case. And I think last year, at this point in time, Ryan Poles confidently kind of said, well, this is the best depth I've ever had. Turns out that just was a massive lie because the Bears' offensive line and their depth got exposed during the regular season at various points in time. And so now you kind of look at this whole thing and you start to say, okay, maybe the Bears are onto something here by not even touching Darnell Wright and saying, as much as we love Darnell Wright, we are not going to tip our hand here, and we're just going to flat out say, yeah, he's staying at the left side because that's where we've seen him excel over the last couple of years. And so as an offensive line, I think this makes sense because what you're doing is you're basically saying, who is the sort of one piece right now in this entire group that we can confidently say is going to be a starter for the next 10 to 14 years, let's say. Joe Thuney's not going to be that guy. Drew Dahlman's probably not going to be that guy, even though I could totally see Dahlman or Thuney earning another contract in Chicago. Jonah Jackson's obviously a true wild card. well, you don't really know what you have at the left tackle situation right now. So Darnell Wright's the only sort of long-term building block that this franchise has. And for all we know, let's just be honest about something. Maybe Braxton Jones, in the context of consistency, has a really good year, but the Bears don't bring him back next year simply because they end up having to pay other guys on the roster. And they think that, there's better value in getting more out of Ozzie Trapilo on a rookie deal versus paying a Braxton Jones. Especially, I think, if you think that the sort of upside of a Trapilo is higher than whatever you're going to go ahead and get in Braxton Jones. And so I think, going back to the whole Darnell Wright conversation, when you're trying to create a model for consistency and you're trying to create a model for success, especially with the offensive line, you don't want to just move guys around to move guys around. You have to move guys around with a purpose. And so I think that, when Darnell Wright is sticking at that right tackle spot, it just makes so much more sense. Because quite frankly, that's 1 out of 5 positions on this offensive line right now that is solved. The rest of it, I think, as much as we like to say, yeah, Joe Tooney's going to be healthy, Jonah Jackson's going to be good, we got Drew Dahlman. Like, in terms of the big picture here, the long-term picture, Darnell Wright's the only sort of solution that the Bears have right now.
Yeah, I mean, and just look at the NFL as a whole. I mean, it's not 1980 anymore. The right tackle position is just arguably just as important as the left tackle position. And look at the top tackles in football. There's an argument you could make that the best 2 tackles in football are right tackles, and Penei Sewell and Lane Johnson. There are other guys in the mix too, but you could at least make that argument. It's just, it's just as important as left tackle. And the other thing you have, I mean, I agree with everything you said, but the other thing you have is, if we do have a question mark on the interior, it's right guard with Jonah Jackson. Like, I think he's had an injury, he's been ineffective. If you move Darnell Wright over to the left side, then you have both your guys on the right side as question marks. Like, let's say Ozzie Trapilo would play right tackle more, a rookie making a week 1 start. Then you have 2 question marks at right guard and right tackle. That's not good with Caleb Williams. So keep him there. Like you said, just solidify that position for the next 10 years, and don't really overthink it, which I'm glad they didn't do.
And again, diving in on the right tackle situation here, we'll get to left tackle and Caleb Williams' goals in another moment or two. But the other big thing to kind of keep in mind is that watching Ben Johnson's offense in Detroit last year, over the last couple of years, first off, I think it's worth noting that they had good offensive lines when they had guys like Frank Ragnow there, and again, they still have some of those guys, obviously. Graham Glasgow was a name that I thought performed really well, obviously, but that offensive line really took off once they got that consistency at that right tackle spot. And again, this isn't me saying that Darnell Wright is a Penei Sewell, because I know you've done a lot of draft work. Penei was in a class of his own, and let's just call it how it is, for like 2 or 3 straight years was being projected as the number 1 offensive tackle. And I think if you go back and you look at different draft classes, I mean, there's no doubt in my mind, you're probably looking at 3, 4, 5 consecutive years where Penei Sewell, had he declared in those classes, would have been offensive tackle number 1. Okay, that's a fact in my opinion, okay? Or a fact in my mind, I'm sorry. But then the other big thing I think you look at is that the Bears see Darnell Wright being the next version of a Penei Sewell in terms of everything that he can end up doing, pulling and getting out on the edge, going ahead and making sure that you can play in those, gap schemes versus those zone schemes. With the gap schemes, teams are always going to be pulling at least 1 player. So you could be pulling the center and the tackle, you could pull the guard and the tackle, you could pull the tight end and the tackle, but ultimately in a gap scheme, you want to make sure that one of your best offensive lineman, who to me is Darnell Wright, is smart enough to recognize, when he has to pull versus when he doesn't have to pull. Because this, Ben Johnson offense, I do think that we're going to see a variation of gap scheme plus zone scheme. I do think that what you're also going to end up seeing is this sort of pin pull run. Now, pretty much in pin and pull, it is one of my favorite concepts in football. And the reason being is because what you're basically doing is you are going ahead and you are, as an offensive lineman, there's a pre-snap read that you get to make, and then essentially a post-snap read is the easiest way to define it, right? Now, pre-snap, you're looking to see, is there a guy in your inside gap? If there's a guy in your inside gap, then you are pinning him, okay? That's where the terminology comes from, pin, right? If there's not anyone in your inside gap, then you are effectively pulling, which means you're getting out into space, you are getting around the edge. And based on whether or not you pin and pull, that is, as an offensive lineman, that is basically what the quarterback / the running back is going to end up doing. If it's a quarterback run or if it's just a simple handoff to the running back. But the point is, Darnell Wright is smart enough to sort of fit into any sort of scheme.
Yeah, and he's smart enough and he's athletic enough. I think a lot of people, I know when Darnell Wright was coming out, I had a ton of conversations with people on Twitter because the Bears were running that outside zone scheme at the time, and a lot of people said, he doesn't fit that. He's not athletic enough because he's 6'6", 6'5", 6'6", 330 pounds. Like, he doesn't look like he's super athletic, but he tested really athletic and he is really athletic. So getting him out on pulls and running gap, getting him, pulling him in gap concepts, I love that. I think that's absolutely how you should be using him. Like, he's smart enough, he's athletic enough. And Ben Johnson even said, like, he's not even sure if this is going to be a heavy gap or heavy outside zone or heavy zone. He's going to be doing a little bit of everything in this training camp, and whatever they're better at, that's what they're going to be that's going to be their bread and butter. They're going to be doing a little bit of everything, but they'll figure out what their offensive line is best at, and they'll run that concept more. So I think Darnell Wright is kind of, I don't want to say the complete package because he's not there yet, but he's kind of everything you want out of an offensive lineman. I think he can get to that upper echelon if you just keep him at the same spot and let him go.
Yeah, and just for perspective here, right? So going back and looking at Penei Sewell's draft measurables. So Sewell coming out of Oregon was 6'5", 331, 33.25-inch arms with about a 10.5-inch hands, right? Now his athleticism score, according to Next Gen Stats, was a 86, right, between his production plus his athleticism, whereas Darnell Wright's 6'5", 333, 33.75-inch arms, and then 9-inch hands. And then Darnell Wright's, production, athleticism, the total score was 77. So you're getting two players that are built very similarly, but it is worth noting that they are sort of, Penei Sewell's a little bit more athletic. Now, moving on here to Caleb Williams, dude. This, to me, I think, was the sort of interesting part of the Ben Johnson presser, right? Because he was up there for whatever it felt like 15 to 20 minutes. But Ben Johnson was like, yeah, I've got all these goals for Caleb Williams. I want to see him complete, 60 to 70% of his passes. Now, I think that, first off, the debates about this over the last 4 to 5 hours on social media have been a little bit polarizing because I think people are taking this as like, well, Ben Johnson wants Caleb Williams to start all 17 games, go ahead and complete, 7 out of 10 passes in the regular season, right? Have a high completion percentage. Whereas I think when you ultimately look at this whole thing, Ben Johnson was kind of alluding to, yeah, I want Caleb Williams to complete a high percentage of passes. That's the goal, because we're going to run an offense that's going to be predicated on short, quick passes, him having to do a lot less work because we think our playmakers can be yards after the catch monsters, and we're going to want them to do a lot more work because, the NFL is interesting now, but the days of the drop back passer, you still have quarterbacks, you have to be able to drop back, but the days of the drop back passer are really gone, or they're not as prominent as they used to be, I should say. And the thing is, as teams move to cover 2 schemes, right, those 2 high schemes, what you basically have is a little bit of a resurgence in a sense, because teams are playing with their 2 deep safeties, trying to take away the deep pass. So that effectively forces quarterbacks to stop being drop back passers. That now forces teams to use the run game to set the play action up. The play action obviously has, a deep read, an intermediate read, a short read, and then a check down. Now, I know we're going to see the check down Caleb narratives in a few weeks here, but I don't necessarily think, it's a bad thing at all. 'Cause sometimes those check downs are merely, confidence building throws that you're going to see throughout the start of games, which, again, I should mention this too. Check downs are not just at the NFL level, right? You look at most high school offenses, then you look at a lot of the college offenses too, and there's going to be checkdowns built in. Now, I think that, to me, Caleb's going to get a little bit of a bad sort of reputation here with some of these, with a high completion percentage, because some people are going to look at it and be like, well, he's just throwing these simple, easy, 5-6 yard passes. It's all checkdowns, blah, blah, blah. But then the other part of it is this. I think the issue is that he's coming from an offense where at Oklahoma and at USC plus last year, there were never really any checkdowns built in. So they're forcing him to sort of play slower in order to go ahead and make sure that he gets more comfortable.
Yeah, and we saw it last year too. There were times where there was no check down built into the plays that that the Bears were calling last year, and that obviously was not successful because the Bears didn't have an offensive line and they needed to check down a lot. So yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, they're going to use DJ Moore, they're going to use Rome Odunze they're going to get the ball in their hands and let them kind of do their work after the catch. I completely agree with you there. There will be times, when you get into third and long where you're going to have to throw the ball, past the sticks, and then he's going to have to throw the ball a little bit farther. But I thought it was interesting though, because ever since he was hired and everything Ben Johnson has said is he loves explosive plays. That's his kind of mantra. I understand, teams are just kind of dropping into that cover two shell, so it's hard to really hit those explosive plays all the time, but he's always been an explosive play guy. So having the goal of completing 70% of your passes just kind of goes against that a little bit. I think it's more of like, this is a goal. It's more of like a benchmark. Like, we want you to be around 70%. If Caleb Williams completes 68% of his passes, is that going to be a failed season? Absolutely not. I do think there are going to be times where he wants Caleb Williams to take more shots, but I think more, what this is more than anything is getting Caleb Williams in just the right mindset going into the season, where you don't have to be big play hunting every single play. We need you to check down. We need you to get you through your progressions and just get the ball and keep the offense moving a little bit. But again, that's just kind of the mindset they want him to be in. But they're still going to take their shots from time to time. If he completes 65% of the passes, but the Bears win games, I don't think they're going to care. But getting him kind of that benchmark is just getting him kind of in the right mindset for how he needs to play to kind of keep that moving. And I think Caleb Williams also mentioned how, in the OTAs and everything, he was missing throws, checkdowns to the left or short throws to the left, I think it was, he said. And he said he worked on that. That's something he worked on specifically, these last couple months before training camp is hitting those short throws to the left. So I think there is going to be a lot of not necessarily checkdowns, but short passes to kind of set up, to kind of keep you ahead of the sticks, and then take your shots when the defense allows you to take your shots, not take a shot just because you don't really know where to go to the ball and you're just throwing the ball deep just because you got frustrated and you want to hit a big play. So I think that's kind of where this, mindset and these goals are coming from.
And so, okay, this just occurred to me, right? Because you look at Caleb last year and you see, it's weird, right? Because the Bears offense had this slow start to the season, and then they figured it out, and then everything came crashing down. But I think that to start the year last year, you kind of saw USC Caleb. But if you look at Caleb in terms of his time at USC, I feel like, so going into college, right, USC plus Oklahoma, when he was Oklahoma Caleb, Sooners Caleb, we're going to say OU Caleb, you saw a player that was playing like freaking Superman, right? He was playing more free. And again, that Oklahoma team, I should mention, had a hell of a lot of talent, right? When he took over from Spencer Rattler, it was a couple of years ago. Then you get to 2023, and you saw 2023, Caleb, and that's a team that, didn't really have a hell of a lot of talent. So then Caleb was playing more Superman than he probably ever should have before, which I should also mention. One of the issues with the Lincoln Riley offense, because we've seen, guys like Baker Mayfield and Jalen Hurts playing that offense too, is the fact that there's a little bit too much freedom that quarterbacks have. And then you transition to the next level, and all of a sudden it's, we want you to be free, but we're also going to make sure that you have to play within the structure of things, especially as a young quarterback. Now, the reality of it, I think, is that what Ben Johnson's trying to do with all these goals that he set for Caleb Williams is that he wants Caleb to, like I said earlier, slow it down, but also play within the scheme and within the structure of the offense. Because offenses are very interesting because it's like defense, everybody can mess up, but one or two guys can make a play and everything is sort of all good. Whereas on offense, you need all 11 guys to be doing their job in order for everything to go ahead and really be successful. So ultimately, the determining factor of what this offense is going to look like comes down to how Caleb Williams plays. And I think that, there's hey, get the ball out on time. You got to get the ball out quicker. You got to go ahead. You got to, make sure you're playing faster, speed up your internal clock. Part of that, I think, is also is building that confidence and saying, look, complete those quick, short, easy throws. Go and pad your stats. That's completely okay. But make sure that you're building that confidence because, what you're going to see, the offense you're going to see in weeks 1 to 4 is ultimately going to be very different from what you see in weeks 5 to 9, let's say, right? And then so on. And usually I want to say by week 9, 10, 11 is where we're going to have a pretty good idea of what this team really is and what they're all about on offense.
Yeah, and the other thing I want to say is I hope they don't coach the special out of Caleb Williams, because I know with like Matt Eberflus it was don't throw interceptions, take care of the ball, and it kind of Caleb Williams was drafted because of the Superman plays he was making, in college. The things he could do are just, special. And I think Matt Eberflus tried to coach that out of him and just be like, no, just protect the football, don't make mistakes. And I think that's not exactly what's happening here. I think when he says, 70% completion percentage, we're really talking first and second down here. Stay in front of the chains, give yourself a chance on third down, but there's still going to be times when Caleb Williams has to be, put on the Superman cape and make a special play. It's 3rd and 10 and, game on the line. You can't exactly just throw a screen pass and hope to get a first down there. You're going to need your young quarterback who was drafted with the first overall pick because of the special things he can do outside the pocket, because of the special things he can do with his arm strength. You're going to need him to eventually do that. So I just hope that they're not coaching that out of him. And I don't think they are the way that I know that Matt Eberflus and their coaching staff absolutely did. So I just want to make sure that he still stays aggressive when it's time to be aggressive, because there will be times when he needs to do that.
It's going to be very fun to watch Caleb Williams' development. I think the last thing we got to talk about here is, dude, we talked about this for a couple minutes earlier in the show, but let's wrap the show up with this. This left tackle situation is really messy to me. Now, the Bears are, I think, practicing 3 to 4, I think even 5 times this week. I got to go back. I got to look at the schedule. But what's so interesting to me is that, Ben Johnson's not giving precedence to any of these guys, right? Karana Magaji, Braxton Jones, Ozzie Trapilo. Everyone's sort of starting out on an even playing field. To me, the big sort of thing to really keep in mind here is as we look at the left tackle position. You and I kind of seem to be in agreement that this thing, as we talked about on a prior show, this thing seems to be Ozzie Trapilo's to sort of lose. In between all that, you've got a Karana Magaji, and then there's Braxton Jones, who unfortunately has to sort of prove himself all over again. But the Bears are basically saying this thing's wide open. They're all going to have to prove themselves, and if it takes 3 weeks to figure out who the left tackle is, cool. If it takes 6 weeks, that's completely okay, but they want to have the best 5 out there possible, which I understand is coach speak, but this truly is a situation where, you're hoping to finally find that left tackle that can, again, start for the foreseeable future and not just, 2, 3, 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, I did think it was Ozzy Trapillo's job to lose. I'd say, when we, talked last week, but I also thought Braxton Jones was going to be out at least to start training camp. So that's kind of where I was coming out there. At this point, I hope Braxton Jones. I think it's the best case scenario for the Bears. I believe is Braxton Jones kind of solidifying, winning this left tackle position kind of out of camp, because he is the vet. He is the guy. I mean, Ozzy Trapillo he's a rookie. No matter of how good of a rookie offensive lineman you are, you're gonna face some growing pains. You're going to lose, some reps here and there. Like I said before, Braxton Jones has his warts, absolutely, but you kind of know where you're getting there. I think with how important this season is, having a reliable left tackle, at least someone who he is and where his strengths and weaknesses are, I think is very, very important. So I think the best case scenario is Braxton Jones winning. I think he, just because he has experience there, I think he does have a leg up. It's kind of the way Ben Johnson mentioned it. No one's a front runner at this point, but he thinks that Braxton Jones' experience should help him out in that competition. And I absolutely agree. I think Ozzy Trapillo still has a chance to win it. Karan, I don't know so much, but I think Ozzy Trapillo still has a chance to win the job, which would be great as well. But I would say he's got a little bit of an uphill battle, at least, week one. If Ozzy Trapillo is your swing tackle to start as a rookie, I think that's absolutely fine. That is totally fine. What Ozzy Trapillo can really do this training camp is show what he can do and make the Bears feel comfortable moving on from Braxton Jones after this year. Let him go, because we saw Ozzy in training camp. We saw him in the preseason. He looked like he knows what he's doing. We can build off that. We can let Braxton Jones walk. We can get a comp pick for letting Braxton Jones walk, because he is a starting caliber left tackle in the NFL. He's going to get a decent sized contract. I'm willing to let another team pay him that contract, most likely, depending on how he looks this year. You get that comp pick, and then Ozzy just kind of steps into the starting position next year. I think that, in my mind, that is the best case scenario for this left tackle, position. And I think one of the reasons the Bears are so quiet about it, kind of word salad, like you said earlier, is I think it is just kind of really an open competition right now, and they don't really know who the starter is going to be just yet. But in my mind, the best case scenario is Braxton winning that job.
I mean, in terms of the guy that could step in and sort of excel right away, that to me is Braxton Jones. If we are projecting 3, 4, 5, even 6 years down the road, which I know that seems like a long way off, but again, this is the NFL, things move quickly. That person to me is Ozzy Trapillo. But I do like the point you made about how, well, it does seem as if Braxton Jones wins this job, excels, the Bears let him walk in free agency. You're basically manipulating the comp pick formula and the system that allows the rich to get richer, because the Eagles plus the Ravens do that all the time. Now, to do that, you also have to be smart with drafting, which we hope that the Bears are much smarter with drafting and developing their players, especially over the last couple of years, because this team's had 10 or 11, I think, top 100 picks in the Ryan Poles era. So it's certainly more than we are used to seeing from this franchise. But to me, I think, what's going to happen is it's either Braxton or Ozzy Trapillo as your starter at left tackle. I would lean Ozzy Trapillo because, there's going to be growing pains, but he's also your hand-picked left tackle. Like, he's the guy that, Ben Johnson and Dan Ruchar, the offensive line coach, plus Kyle Devan, I think the assistant offensive line coach, kind of spent time scouting alongside Ryan Poles and Ian Cunningham. Braxton is good, but you kind of have seen what Braxton is at this point, so maybe he's hit his ceiling. And then Karan, I think, not to basically say Karan's not good, but I think a better scenario for the Bears is Karan gets that cross training at left tackle and right tackle, and then he's able to play either guard spot, because then you're kind of getting a little bit of something out of all three of them, and I should admit it's true, right? So we're talking about this on the Bear Report website yesterday, guys, which, again, if you haven't done so, create a free or subscriber account. Tons of good stuff dropping for training camp there. But one of the things that, we discussed was the fact that a lot of these college players, like a Karan Amagaji, that go to these smaller programs, they play tackle in college, right? Like you play tackle in these Ivy League schools or these smaller D2, D3 schools, or even these lower end D1 schools. And then you get to the NFL and, suddenly you are 6'5", 6'6", but your 32-inch arms and your 8-inch hands have you moving inside to guard, because that's just where teams see your natural face. If you don't have crazy long arms at the next level, you're not freakishly tall, well, you're probably not going to go ahead and end up playing tackle at the NFL level, which when we do look at some of these, guys from a lot of these smaller schools, there doesn't really seem to be a lot of them that, played at a smaller school in college and then went to the NFL and found their footing as a long-term left tackle or right tackle.
Yeah, and it's not always arm length, it could be, foot speed. It could be a whole, anchor. It could be a whole variety of reasons why those small school guys move inside, because Karan actually has plenty of length. He's got really long arms, which, but I agree with you. Like he can, if he can be your swing tackle, he can back up, some spots on the interior. I think that's kind of what you're looking at least now, because he was such a raw player coming out. We all knew that he kind of got bad luck last year. He got forced into action where he really shouldn't have been playing in the NFL last year. Like he needed a redshirt year. And I think, you kind of have to slow play it. So I think, yeah, he's a perfect guy to be your swing offensive lineman a little bit. I think he still has plenty of potential. I think him not winning the job does not mean that he can't eventually be a left tackle or even a starting guard in this league. I think it's just going to take him a little bit more time. So I think I think he's comfortably in third in this competition. But I'm talking about best case scenario for the Bears is the best case scenario is that Karan Abagaji makes their decision very difficult, and he comes out and takes a big step, and maybe he doesn't win the job, but they're really just impressed the way he looks, and that just makes it even an easier decision to let Braxton Jones go if you really think you have two guys who could potentially fill in at left tackle.
It's all going to be stuff that we have to continue watching and monitoring, especially as these training camp practices start on Wednesday. Wednesday is for those of you guys that are wondering, the media is there, but it's a closed practice, so there's not going to be live tweeting. So once practice is over, expect a flurry of tweets from the Bears beat, as well as Zach Pearson and the Bear Report account on Twitter. Like I said, guys, the closed practices, these are Bears PR policies. It's not the beat or us withholding information. We pretty much get told, well, this is what you can't go ahead and live tweet, okay? The reason being is because these are usually the days where the Bears like to experiment and change things up, and they don't want, to do that type of stuff in front of the fans because of the cameras and recording and all that. But before we get out of here, make sure you're following Steve and I on Twitter at CFC Bears and at Usayd Koshul. Check out the Halas Beat on Twitter as well at Halas Beat. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Give the podcast a 5-star rating and review wherever you get your podcasts. We're going to be back here in a couple days with another episode. There's certainly a ton of information to go and talk about as these camp practices heat up. The Bears season's here. We are ready to go and full steam ahead here at the Halas Beat. So bear down, ladies and gentlemen. Enjoy the rest of your week. You will see and hear from us next time.